All right, so today we're diving deep into grit, that whole passion and perseverance thing, really digging into Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance.
Yeah, you mentioned you were super curious about what makes some folks just stick with it, no matter what, while others fizzle out. Duckworth really nails down what drives success, and it's not always what we think.
Right, exactly. And we've got a ton to unpack. Her research is really fascinating. West Point cadets, those national spelling bee superstars, teachers in tough schools, high achievers all over the place. Plus, you found some amazing audio clips of Duckworth herself and some really insightful discussions about her work.
Definitely a good mix.
So the mission here is to really get to the heart of grit, what it is, how it works, all that, without totally overloading you. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, perfect. So Duckworth kicks off her book talking about her time as a math teacher.
Yeah.
And honestly, what she saw really flipped the script on what we think about talent.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It was like the kids everyone pegged as gifted, the ones who seemed like natural math whizzes, they weren't always the ones who ended up excelling.
Interesting.
Yeah, and she tells a story about David, who really struggled at first. They didn't think he was ready for the harder stuff, but guess what? He goes on to get a PhD in mechanical engineering from, wait for it, UCLA. And get this, he becomes a rocket scientist.
Wow. That's incredible.
Right. It really makes you think, are we missing the mark when we just focus on that initial talent spark? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. We're always searching for that inherent genius, that it factor.
Exactly. And Duckworth even brings up that McKinsey report, The War for Talent. It's got a pretty broad definition of talent, sure, but even they jump straight to those intrinsic gifts, like it's the be-all and end-all.
Right. Like we're hardwired to look for that flash of brilliance.
And she makes a really strong case that this obsession with natural talent can actually backfire big time. Well, it kind of overshadows the importance of good old-fashioned effort, like buckling down and doing the work.
I see.
Like, take Scott Barry Kaufman.
Okay.
He was labeled a slow learner as a kid. Auditory processing issues, low scores on those early IQ tests, the whole 9 yards. They even put him in special education. But here's the thing. One teacher saw something in him, believed in his potential, and it changed everything.
Wow, that's powerful.
Isn't it? And from there, he just took off. Degrees from Carnegie Mellon, Cambridge, then Yale. He became a top academic psychologist. I mean, think about it. Have you ever, kind of dismissed someone or maybe felt dismissed yourself because of what you thought was natural ability rather than the effort they were putting in?
That's a really good question to ask ourselves.
Totally. It makes you wonder how much potential we might be missing out on.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, okay, with all this talk about talent, how does Duckworth actually define grit? What's the recipe, so to speak?
Well, at its core, grit is this sustained passion and perseverance, and you've got to apply it over the long haul to achieve something big no matter what roadblocks you hit. It's sticking with it, not just a quick burst of energy.
Got it. And she uses those super clear equations to show how grit is different from talent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It all comes back to effort.
Totally. She lays it out like this. Talent times effort equals skill, okay? Then skill times effort equals achievement. Boom. Effort shows up twice. That's the key takeaway.
So it's not enough to just have the talent, right? You've got to put in the work to actually make something of it.
Exactly. Like your natural abilities might give you a head start, but without consistent effort, you're not going to reach your full potential. It's not just about raw skill. It's about applying that skill day after day to reach those big goals.
I like that. It shifts the focus, from what you're born with to what you actually do with what you've got.
Right. And she uses some amazing examples to illustrate this. Like, have you heard of Warren McKenzie? The potter.
Vaguely, remind.
He dedicated his whole life to pottery, constantly honing his craft, just working at it,
Yeah.
And he had this famous saying, the first 10,000 pots are difficult.
Whoa.
Right. Mastery, it doesn't happen overnight. It's years of focused effort and practice, one pot at a time. It's not about being perfect right away. It's about that constant striving, that commitment to keep going.
Makes sense. And then there's Bob Mankoff, the cartoon editor of The New Yorker for like forever.
Yeah.
That's a story about not giving up even when it feels like the world's saying no.
Oh, absolutely. He got rejected by the New Yorker so many times you wouldn't believe it. Like, enough rejection slips to wallpaper a room, literally.
No way.
Yeah, and he even tried stand-up comedy for a while before focusing on cartoons. But he never gave up on that dream of being a New Yorker cartoonist, and after years of rejections, he finally made it.
That's incredible.
It is, right. It's that laser focus on a specific goal, that willingness to keep pushing even when you hit a wall. So think about your own long-term goals. Would you keep going even if you faced rejection after rejection? I mean, that's real grit.
That's a tough one. Okay, so this brings up the whole nature versus nurture debate. Is grit something you're born with, or can you actually build it up?
Big question, right. And Duckworth dives into the genetics of it, looking at twin studies. And those studies do point to a genetic component, like the estimates are around 37% for perseverance and 20% for passion. So genes do play a role. Some folks might have a slight edge towards being grittier. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
Those percentages, they're about trends across a whole population. When it comes to you, specifically your environment, the choices you make, those have a much bigger impact on your grit level than your genes.
So it's not like height, where, nutrition matters, but genes have a huge say. She uses that analogy, right?
Exactly. Your height is heritable, for sure. But things like nutrition and your environment while you're growing up, they have a real impact. Grit's kind of the same. It's shaped by what happens to you, the world around you.
Makes sense.
And to drive this point home, she talks about the Flynn effect.
Oh, yeah, that's the thing about IQ scores going up all over the world, right?
Exactly. Over the last century, IQ scores have been climbing like crazy globally. And that tells us that our environment, things like education, challenging jobs, being surrounded by information, those things really affect our abilities.
Wow. So our environment can actually make us smarter.
It seems that way, yeah. And there's this other thing called the social multiplier effect. It's this idea that when people get better at something, like basketball, for instance, it actually raises the bar for everyone. Like the whole level of play gets elevated.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. And it's not just basketball. Think about things like abstract reasoning. As we, as a society, get better at those skills, it kind of pushes everyone forward. The point is, our abilities aren't fixed. Even if you don't feel naturally talented at something, the right environment and persistent effort, they can lead to huge growth.
That's really encouraging, to know that we can change and grow, even in areas where we might feel we're not naturally gifted.
Totally. And here's another encouraging tidbit. Duckworth's research shows that grit scores actually tend to go up as people get older.
Really? So we get grittier as we age?
It seems that way, yeah. We learn from our experiences, face challenges, make choices, and all of that helps us develop grit over time.
Makes sense. Okay, so if it's not all about genes, what are the key ingredients that make someone gritty?
Right.
Duckworth talks about 4 psychological assets, right?
Yeah, she calls them the 4 psychological assets of grit, and they tend to develop in a particular order. First up is interest. Passion, she says, starts with genuinely enjoying what you do. It's tough to stick with something for years if you just don't like it.
Totally. You can't force passion, right?
Yeah.
But she also says that interests aren't always these big, bold things that hit you like a ton of bricks, right?
Absolutely. Those early sparks of interest, they're kind of fragile. You got to nurture them, explore them, give them room to grow. And she points out that you need those repeated positive experiences, those moments that rekindle your attention and pull you in deeper.
I see.
Like she uses the example of Mike Hopkins, the astronaut. His fascination with space travel, it wasn't sparked by just one shuttle launch. It was watching several over time that really cemented that interest. And having people who encourage you, that's crucial too. Like Chef Mark Vetri, he found support and a sense of belonging in his grandma's kitchen. And then later in the restaurant world, that helped solidify his love for cooking.
So you need that initial spark, but you also need to tend to it, let it grow, and have people cheering you on along the way. What's next?
All right, the second ingredient, the secret sauce, is practice. But we're not talking about just going through the motions here. It's that daily discipline of pushing yourself to get better, to do things better than you did yesterday.
I like that. So it's about being intentional about improving.
Exactly. And Duckworth is a big fan of deliberate practice. It's very focused, very intentional effort, the kind that pushes you past your comfort zone, beyond your current skill level.
So you're not just coasting. You're actively seeking out those challenges.
Exactly. You got to pinpoint your weaknesses, then practice like crazy to improve them. And getting feedback is key. It's not always fun, deliberate practice because you're constantly pushing your limits, but the payoff is huge.
It sounds kind of intense.
Yeah.
Not exactly like being in flow, where everything feels effortless and you lose track of time.
You're right. Flow is that beautiful state of being totally absorbed in what you're doing, where your skills and the challenge are perfectly matched. But deliberate practice, it's often about struggle, even frustration, as you push yourself harder.
Makes sense.
But here's a cool twist. Duckworth found that people with more grit actually experience more flow overall in their lives.
Really? So pushing yourself through that tough practice actually leads to more of those effortless, joyful moments.
It seems that way, yeah. Being able to consistently engage in deliberate practice might actually unlock more of those flow states down the road. And she even talks about how she used deliberate practice to prepare for her TED Talk, all the meticulous effort and refinement that went into it. Thinking about your own life, have you ever really zeroed in on a specific weakness, like in a skill you were developing, and just practiced relentlessly to overcome it?
Yeah, I remember learning a difficult piano piece, and I just kept playing those tricky passages over and over. It wasn't always fun, but when I finally nailed it, the feeling was amazing.
There you go. It's that focused effort that often leads to the biggest rewards.
Okay, so we've got interest, practice. What's the third piece of the grit puzzle?
It's purpose. This is the deep down belief that what you're doing matters, that it has meaning not just for you, but maybe for others too.
I see.
Duckworth argues that having that sense of purpose, it can fuel your passion like nothing else. It often connects to a desire to make a positive impact, to contribute to something bigger than yourself.
Right. And she uses that story about the 3 bricklayers to illustrate this, doesn't she?
Yeah, the one where they're all doing the same job laying bricks. But when asked what they're doing, the first guy says laying bricks. The second one says building a church. And the third guy, he says building the house of God.
Powerful.
Right. Same task, but that sense of purpose, it transforms the whole experience for the third bricklayer. And Duckworth also talks about Amy Wrzesniewski's research on how people view their work. Do they see it as just a job, a career, or a calling? And the people who see their work as a calling, they're the ones who tend to have way more grit. Like Michael Stone, his experience with the Summer Bridge program, that's a great example. It ignited his passion for education, for helping young people, and it gave him that deep sense of purpose. Now, Duckworth does say that you don't necessarily need a purely altruistic purpose to be gritty, but it's definitely a common thread among those who show exceptional grit.
So it's about finding that deeper meaning in what you're doing.
Exactly. Okay, are you ready for the final piece of the grit equation?
Lay it on me.
It's hope. That unshakable perseverance that keeps you going when the going gets tough, when you hit those inevitable setbacks and failures.
Yeah, that makes sense. But how do you cultivate hope?
Well, Duckworth links it strongly to having a growth mindset.
Okay, remind me about growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
Sure, a growth mindset is that belief that your abilities, your intelligence, they're not set in stone. You can develop them through hard work and dedication. A fixed mindset, on the other hand, is the belief that your qualities are basically fixed. You can't really change them.
Got it.
And Duckworth brings in Marty Seligman's work on learned helplessness and learned optimism. It's fascinating. Optimists, when bad things happen, they tend to see them as temporary and specific to that situation. Pessimists, they see those same events as permanent and all-encompassing.
Interesting. So your outlook really influences how you handle setbacks.
Absolutely. And then there's Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset. It shows that believing in your ability to learn and improve, it makes you way more resilient when you face failure.
I see.
And there was a study with young teachers. It found a strong link between their levels of optimism and grit and how well their students were doing academically. So hope in this context, it's about believing in your capacity to bounce back, to grow, to overcome those challenges.
It sounds like these 4 assets, interest, practice, purpose, and hope, they all work together, like pieces of a puzzle, to build a truly gritty person. But can we actually do anything to develop these qualities?
Definitely. Duckworth talks about growing grit from the outside in, especially through how parents raise their kids and the influence of the culture around us.
So our environment plays a big role.
Huge role. When it comes to raising gritty kids, she talks about this balance between being supportive and setting high standards, what she calls supportive demanding.
I like that. So it's not about being super strict. It's about providing support, while also pushing them to reach their potential.
Exactly. She gives examples like Steve Young's parents. They were incredibly loving and supportive, but also had high expectations for him, in school and stuff. And then there's Francesca Martinez's parents. They were super nurturing, but also encouraged her to overcome the challenges she faced with cerebral palsy. Isn't it? And Duckworth even talks about her own family's hard thing rule. Every member has to pick something challenging, something that requires consistent effort, and they can't quit until a certain time is up.
That's a great idea.
It is, right. And then there's the whole culture piece. Duckworth talks about Dan Chambliss's research on swimmers, and it suggests that being part of a gritty team or environment, it can actually make you grittier, like through peer pressure and adopting those values.
Interesting. So the people you surround yourself with really matter.
Big time. And she gives some really cool examples of gritty cultures, like West Point, super intense and demanding, with all those traditions and expectations. And then there's the Seattle Seahawks under Pete Carroll.
Oh, yeah. He's known for building a strong team culture.
Totally. He intentionally created this culture of constant competition, always striving to get better. He had these sayings, always compete, finish strong, and a strict no whining, no complaining, no excuses rule. His clear vision, the discipline, the open communication, all of that fostered a culture of grit within the team.
It's amazing how a leader can shape the culture of a whole organization.
It is.
Now, I know she also talks about trying to measure grit more objectively.
Yeah.
Not just relying on people saying how gritty they think they are. She mentions Willingham's Personal Qualities Project and her own grit grid.
Right. Willingham was looking at follow-through, like in extracurricular activities, how consistently students stuck with things and how much they progressed. And that turned out to be a good predictor of success in college.
Makes sense.
And Duckworth's grit grid is her way of quantifying grit by looking at how long someone's been pursuing their goals and how much progress they've made over multiple years. So it's not just about sticking with something, it's about showing real development over time.
Interesting. So it's a more tangible way to measure grit than just asking people how gritty they feel.
Exactly.
Okay, before we wrap up, she brings up a really intriguing and maybe unexpected question. Is there such a thing as too much grit? Like, can it actually be a bad thing sometimes?
Yeah, she touches on that. She talks about Aristotle's idea of virtues being a balance between extremes. And while her research hasn't really pinpointed a too much grit point, she does acknowledge that there are times when knowing when to pivot, when to adjust your goals, or even when to let go of a particular path can be the smarter move. Like true grit, it's about being dedicated to those meaningful long-term goals, but it also requires wisdom and flexibility. It's not about blindly charging ahead no matter what. Has there ever been a time when you stuck with something for too long, even when it felt like it was time to move on?
Yeah, there probably have been times when I was too stubborn to change course.
Yeah.
It's tough to know when to hold on and when to let go.
For sure.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've really explored this fascinating idea of grit, that potent mix of passion and perseverance. It's not about innate talent. It's about those qualities we can develop and strengthen over time. Nurturing our interests, engaging in deliberate practice, connecting with a sense of purpose, and cultivating a hopeful outlook. And the way we were raised, the cultures we're part of, they all play a role in shaping our grit.
Absolutely. And understanding these elements of grit, it can be incredibly empowering. It gives you a framework for tackling your own goals and challenges with more resilience and commitment. Knowing that sustained effort and dedication, they're the keys to achieving those big aspirations.
So, here's something to think about as you go about your day. What's one area of your life where you'd like to cultivate a bit more grit? And what's one small, deliberate step you can take, starting today, to nurture your interest in that area, practice more effectively, connect with a deeper sense of purpose, or foster a more hopeful outlook when you hit those roadblocks? And if you're hungry for more, we highly recommend checking out Angela Duckworth's Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening.